Hi, this is Kogito, and I'm back with another Through the Ages video. So in the last video, we saw that as a result of my victory against Sakich in a two-player game, a few parts of this group have been decided. First of all, I am guaranteed to finish ahead of El Chupacabra, and second of all, Sakich, unfortunately, is guaranteed to finish last and be eliminated from the tournament. However, the winner of this group has not been decided yet, because I'm only 6.5 points ahead of DB Starman, which means that if DB Starman wins both of their remaining games, a 3-player game and a 2-player game, and I get 0 points in them, then DB Starman will finish first ahead of me. So, this next game, which is a 3-player game between me, DB Starman, and Sakich, will be very important to see if I will be guaranteed to win, or if DB Starman has a chance to finish first instead. So without further ado, let's take a look. In this game, I'm playing second, and we'll take a look at the leaders and wonders. So in Age 3, there is Hollywood, but only Chaplin is a theater leader. There is spaceflight, along with Jobs, Bill Gates, and Marie Curie, so some more spaceflight synergy than Hollywood synergy. There is Pierre, but no internet. There's a Manhattan Project, but Gandhi to make strength pushes a little less relevant. There's also a Red Cross in Italy, along with the Ocean Liner Service. Relevant combination. There's no Maria to pair with the Ocean Liner Service, though. There is, however, a Harvard College to pair with the Science Synergy. On the other hand, there is also all 4 culture leaders in this game, with Shakespeare, Bach, Gotti, and Darwin, which suggests maybe not necessarily Hollywood synergy, but at least a culture push may be better in this game than it is in a normal 3-player game, especially with Gandhi also in the game. There is also James Watt, albeit no railroad. There is, however, Newton to pair with the potential space flight. Darwin also kind of prepares for the space flight. Less so, though. In Age 1, there's a number of good wonders, as well as some notable leaders. What I notice about the set of Age 1 leaders is a lot of them like to be elected earlier. There aren't that many leaders that are more transition leaders. Eleanor, a few others arguably, but a lot of them are also like being elected early. So an Age A leader that you might want to replace quickly could be considered here. To get things started, Sakich takes Ashoka. Ashoka less good when you're playing first because you have no chance to get a yellow card with him on your first turn, and you have less of a chance to get good cards in your third turn, which is when you usually want to get 2 or 3 colors with Ashoka. On the other hand, Aristotle, also not super exciting when playing first. Boudica could be considered. She's less good in 3-player than she is in 2 and 4-player, because you need to be the strongest to get her regular bonus. On the other hand, there aren't any strength leaders in the row right now. There are Caesar and Alexander in the deck, but they might not be revealed, or if they are, they might not get picked. There is a Colossus in the row, but it might be a little while before it gets built, so I think that Boudica would also be good in this game. As for me, there's a number of options for me in this game that could be considered. As mentioned previously, I think Boudica is pretty good in this game, so I could consider Boudica plus maybe the Cultural Heritage or the Colosseum. The Engineering Genius should also be strongly considered, as it always should be. Cleopatra also perhaps, although taking her without having I should be able to get a wonder with her, but it might be the Colossus, which would be fine, but is one of the least exciting wonders with Cleopatra, because you can only use her ability on 2 stages of it. There are a few reasons I took the library. I think, well, 2 major reasons. First of all, I think it is the best AJ wonder in this deck. Colossus, I know Martin for sure really likes it. There's no Suez Canal in this game, though, and I could maybe hope to get Caesar with it, but there aren't. The strength push, maybe I could get an early Yanziska or something, but it's looking a little difficult, perhaps, and I think that Library is just a more much more consistent wonder than Colossus, which can be more swingy with no Suez in the game. The other wonders, Acropolis could also potentially be good with the amount of culture leaders in this game, but it's also not on the row right now, so I don't know if it'll come out or if I'll be in a good position to take it if it is. So I just think that Library, compared to these other wonders, is just on a higher tier of power. Whereas the leaders feel roughly equivalent in strength to me. Some are better and some are worse, but I thought the difference between the leaders wasn't as big as the difference between the wonders. And if I take the Engineering Genius, I was a little concerned. For example, let's say that DB Starman takes the Colossus, and then Sakich takes the Library. with the Colosseum being discarded on Sakach's turn. That means that if I took the Engineering Genius, there's a chance that I might not actually get an AJ Wonder with it. Now, there are a number of good H1 Wonders that I could hope to get early. Silk Road, Universal House, Forbidden City. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. I would probably still be able to use the Engineering Genius, but that probably is not certainly, and that it can definitely be a dangerous situation you're in to take an Engineering Genius without an AJ Wonder. So the last reason, though, that I picked the library is because I thought there was a pretty good chance I would get Cleopatra as my leader if DB Starman doesn't take her or either of these cards. Thought there was a pretty good chance they would take the Engineering Genius, and then maybe they would take the Colossus, but there's also, I thought there was a good chance they would take one of these two. And then if that happened, then I could get Cleopatra on my turn. And Cleopatra has a very strong synergy with the library. So that was I think the final reason that tipped me over to choosing library over Engineering Genius, because it would make Cleopatra a much better leader for me. And I'm in general, I think, higher on Cleopatra than consensus. DB Stoneman does indeed take Engineering Genius and Boudica, which also I think is good. Age 1 begins. Sakach builds a mine, increases the population, elects Ashoka, and takes Frugality instead of Colosseum. But the Frugality is a yellow card, not the most exciting yellow card, but AJ Frugality is still okay, and obviously Sakach wants a color for Ashoka. Colosseum, so I can definitely see an argument for that being better than Colosseum. On the other hand, you do want a Wonder as Ashoka to have a way to spend the extra resources you get with Ashoka, but on the other hand, Acropolis is also on the row right now, and is a pretty good Wonder in this game, so it's also probably fine to wait for Acropolis with me having taken a Wonder, and DB Starman likely taking the Colossus instead of the Acropolis. And as we saw, there are good H1 Wonders in the deck too. I do take Cleopatra, say that she's good with library because you can build a mine this turn, and you can build a mine and one stage on your first turn, and on the second turn you can potentially build the second stage, and then the third with Cleopatra, and then third turn use your ability again on the third stage, and it's just a very clean way to use Cleopatra as extra resources. So I definitely valued that above, for example, Homer, although I think Homer would also be good for me. I draw a Wealthy Territory and the Phalanx Tactic. Happy to see a tactic so early. DB Starman elects Boudica, does take the Colossus, which makes sense, increases the population, and builds a mine. All sensible place. Sakach chooses, instead of taking the Acropolis, for example, to take the Alchemy and the Irrigation. Notable play. Irrigation, I think there is some synergy. There's no Machu Picchu or Barbarossa, but there is Ocean Liner Service, so that's some Irrigation synergy. And also, obviously, it gives Sakach all three colors in their hand on turn 3, which is great, and is probably worth delaying the lab. Yeah, I think it probably is. So, I think this play makes sense from Sakach. As for me, I have a little bit of a decision. I can increase my population, and now the choice is essentially, well, there's sort of two independent choices. One is, how do I get out of corruption? Do I want to build a lab, or do I want to build another stage of library? The second question is which cards to take from the row. We'll do the second one first, I think, because I think it's more straightforward. This is a game where printing press is quite strong, I will say, because there's Leonardo for it, and there's also both Shakespeare and Gotti and Darwin, so there's pretty much as much printing press energy as you're ever going to get. So I think printing press, even for 2 civil actions, should be highly considered. That being said, I think Knights is more important because I have the Phalanx Tactic in my hand already, and so guaranteeing that I'll be able to get the Knights is more important than the printing press, most likely. Now, that being said, there is another reason to go for the printing press, which is this turn I could potentially build another stage of library and then take the printing press, with the plan being, instead of building a second lab, I would instead put that population into a printing press at some later time. That line definitely needs to be highly considered. Now, it is difficult to give up the knight, though, is the main issue with that, and I can't... Now, yeah, if I couldn't get out of corruption just by building the second stage and not increasing my population. Yeah. So, basically, I need to choose between the Knights and the printing press. So, choosing the printing press over the Knights does feel pretty, optimistic. Definitely, especially since DB Starman has the Colossus, I think there's reason to be worried about DB Starman's strength potential. So giving up the Knights here feels way too risky to me. So for that reason, if we're taking the Knights, that leaves less of a reason to leave this population open for printing press. On the other hand, there are other reasons to leave this population open, especially for developments, as well as just general flexibility with it. Putting it into this lab gives me an extra science early, but putting it into the library I'll be able to finish the library next turn. So basically, putting this lab only gives me +1 science over putting a stage in the library, and it leaves me less flexible. So for that reason, even while I'm taking the Knights, I think it probably would have been better to build a step of the library. However, I end up building a second lab. Another reason is, like I said, to leave it more flexible. Even though I'm not getting this copy of Printing Press, I still think Printing Press is a good card, and I might get a second copy early that I would want to put the population into instead of this lab. So I think this lab was probably a mistake, and I should have built the stage of the library. That being said, I didn't see this territory because I didn't want to reveal resource development. That would put me in corruption with this turn. I draw a border conflict and an open borders agreement. DB Starman uses the Engineering Genius to finish the Colossus immediately instead of building a lab, notably. Maybe they're a little worried about Sokka building up strength, but I think, or maybe, they might aim for Printing Press, but as we see, they're not. Instead, they're taking a drama and a swordsman. I think for DB Starman, the Printing Press, as we've discussed, is a very strong card, and I think definitely significantly stronger than the drama. So I think this drama should have been a Printing Press. Now, if this were a Printing Press, not building a lab makes sense, because then DB Starman could build a Printing Press next turn. But with taking the drama instead, I think maybe the lab should have been built instead of the Colossus. Because the Colossus isn't doing anything right now with the event deck, no cards having been seeded yet. Sokka builds the second lab, increases the population twice to get out of corruption, and takes the Forbidden City. This turn makes a lot of sense to me. Forbidden City is a way for them to spend their rocks. They'll actually be able to complete it next turn, thanks to the Ashoka bonuses. So yeah, I think this is a very good turn from Sokka. I used the Open Borders Agreement. I think with my planned turn, I would be in corruption if I seeded. We'll see. But, the Open Borders Agreement is also just a nice thing to have going as early as possible to get me extra military card draws. I think offering to Sokka is the natural play with DB Starman having Colossus. Sokka is looking less threatening right now. I increase my population and build a step in the library to get out of corruption. So that, I think, is pretty necessary. So the question is, what else to spend my civil actions on? Thankfully, I got this second copy of Printing Press is indeed early and is available to me for 1 civil action. So I'm rewarded for not taking the first copy. On the other hand, I'm punished for building this lab instead of the stage of the library. So that being said, though, I do think I still want the Printing Press for reasons already stated. I also take the irrigation with it. I discussed with Sokka that I think there's a little bit of irrigation synergy in this game with the Ocean Liner service, but more importantly for me directly, I think the irrigation is important because I'm pursuing printing presses. So with me already having built a second lab, in order to be able to afford putting a population into printing press, I'm going to need to get my food production going pretty quickly, and that's why I think it's very nice for me that I have the irrigation with it too. If it weren't for the printing press, if there were only printing press or only irrigation on the row, I might not have taken either, but I think taking them both together here is quite strong. Other options, the main thing I'm probably giving up here is the Engineering Genius, but I'm also not positive I'll be taking an Age 1 Wonder to begin with, so leaving it for DB Starman, though, is unfortunate, so that's a weakness of this play, but I think these two cards together are also extremely powerful for me. Taking the Monarchy could also be considered, but my science is going to be under a little bit of strain pretty quickly with the Knights and the other stuff I want to play. So, Monarchy instead of Printing Press, maybe, but I also have my third military action already, so the Monarchy is less good. I draw an Aggression, a Raiders, and a bonus card. DB Starman takes the Great Wall and the Engineering Genius, which makes sense. Builds a Warrior to get out of corruption. This turn is a little expensive. DB Starman is still delaying the lab, notably, which is rough. But they're also getting compensated for it with Boudica. Looks like they're taking science with Boudica, so that makes it less bad than it would otherwise be. And the Great Wall definitely looks like it'll be good for them with their having swordsmen. And aligns with their strength play. Looks like DB Starman is planning on pushing strength soon. Sokka sees to reveal development of trade routes, finishes the Forbidden City, and takes a Knights. This turn makes a lot of sense to me. Not much to comment on. I decided to finally seed the wealthy territory with having a bonus card in my hand already. Even though DB Starman has the Colossus, they also only have 2 military actions, whereas I have 3 and a bonus card, so I thought there's at least a decent chance I'll be able to win the wealthy territory, and I also just wanted to get a card in the deck, and I didn't want to see the strength events because, you know, it's looking like there's a pretty good chance I'll be weakest. I reveal Development of Politics, and I draw another territory, the Inhabited one, as well as a Legion Tactic and a second bonus card. I use Cleopatra's Resource to finish Library of Alexandria. In order to get out of Corruption, I also need to... Well, okay. So, the challenge I faced here is, as we saw, DB Starman is looking like they're pushing Strength soon indeed. They don't have enough right now to finish the Great Wall with the Engineering Genius, but unless a resource of development gets revealed, which is possible. But it still seemed like my opponents might be pushing Strength soon, and then by my next turn I might need to... maybe I won't be in risk of an aggression, although I might be, but the event deck definitely might be, you know, if both of my opponents seed, then even if I don't, DB Starman could seed, and then Sakich seeds, and then the first event is flipped. So basically I thought there was a good chance I would need to get some strength next turn, and I also wanted to get some food going earlier, and in order to be able to get a Phalanx Tactic next turn, I need to pop twice to have 2 happy workers, and in order to be able to do that, I need to get the farm upgrade in this turn. This would give me 6 food next turn, which is enough to pop twice. In addition, getting the food upgrades in earlier also will make it easier for me to afford a printing press, which I wanted to set myself up for. So I thought that doing this was important. And then in order to get out of Corruption, I needed to increase my population. So I do sacrifice some things by doing this. Silk Road, probably not good for me in my position. Nostradamus, though, certainly would be. So it was a little sad to let Nostradamus go. On the other hand, there is Leonardo in the deck who will synergize very well with my printing press. So I was also fine waiting for Leonardo, and perhaps Jan Ziska too. I think would also be pretty good for. It would also be good for me with Phalanx. So with 2 strong leaders in the deck left for me, I was comfortable not taking Nostradamus here. You know, as well as, you know, not taking the Iron. You know, also a little rough, but like I said, next turn I was expecting to play the Knights anyway, so I probably wouldn't play the Iron until the following turn. By that time, maybe the 3rd copy of Iron would be on the row, so I thought that setting myself up to be able to have 2 happy workers next turn so that I could get a full Phalanx Tactic going if I needed to was more important than taking any of these cards from the row. As for the cards in my hand to keep, I can keep 4 of them with a library. I think it's the 2 bonus cards and the Phalanx are pretty necessary keeps. So the question is what else, and I think it has to be the Inhabited Territory. Like I said, it's looking pretty likely, or at least very possible, that I'll be weakest. In which case I didn't want to keep the strength events because they were too risky. I drew the 2nd Legion Tactic and Knowledge of the Ancients into 3rd bonus card. DB Starman increases the population twice and takes the Iron. Unfortunately, this and builds a warrior to get out of Corruption. So another advantage of my play, as we saw, is that it left the Iron on 2 civil actions for DB Starman. If I had taken a card from the row, it would have been available for them for 1 civil action. So that's definitely a nice thing about playing my turn the way I did. DB Starman doesn't seed, though. Perhaps they don't have any events to seed. Sakich also doesn't seed. Instead, they develop a knight. They build a knight and play a medieval army tactic to go up to 5 strength. And in addition, they play the Frugality and replace that yellow card in their hand for Ashoka with a rich land, so that makes sense. They have 2 civil actions left, which they use to increase the population and take a drama. Instead of the theology, drama, I mean, I see the logic here. There's Bach and Shakespeare and Gotti, and as we saw previously, culture's looking good, so definitely see the logic behind drama. And drama is also nice with Forbidden City, because Forbidden City means they'll have less happy face issues. They can maybe survive off of dramas, and they don't need the theology, so I understand the drama, even though it's maybe a more risky card to take than theology. It's higher upside, but also it might give them happy face issues. So I have to pay attention to that. They're also not taking the Code of Laws, but they don't have much science to play with it, though they do have the alchemy. So, on the other hand, I think this is the first copy of Code of Laws, so they don't need to take it either. I seed my territory. Again, I wanted to get kind of more non-strength events in the deck, have more knowledge of the deck, And because I have so many bonus cards, I thought there was a good chance I would be able to win it. I revealed Development of Civil Life, which I used to increase my population. I didn't... for me, it's basically a choice between what's more important, the food or the science. And I felt that with the Da Vinci that I will take this turn, I would have enough science that the one additional food I save is here is more important. I do play Leonardo this turn because I'm going to play a nice this turn, even though I unfortunately would have really liked to build a printing press this turn. It would have been really good for me because it would have spent Cleopatra's resource, and it would have given me +2 science as well as the +1 culture. So playing a printing press this turn would be extremely beneficial. However, I didn't feel that I was able to do it because I felt that I would be too vulnerable to aggressions, maybe. Looking at it again, though, I mean, one thing I could have done is built the printing press and then built a warrior. In which case, I would have been at 2 strength. Demetrius Jarman is at 6, but with all my bonus cards, I am still safe from aggression from them. Sakic would be at 7, but I would actually still be safe from aggression even there. What I would be risking would be perhaps a double aggression, which is a reasonable risk to observe because neither of my opponents have been seeding, which were that much. There's only 2 of these cards are mine, which would seem to suggest that there's a decent chance they've been drawing aggressions instead. On the other hand, Demetrius Jarman only has 2 cards in their hand, so the chances of one of these being an aggression maybe not that high. I mean, they do have 6 strength. Maybe they could hope to be able to get an aggression and would keep it for that hope, but they might have preferred keeping something else, maybe bonus cards. I mean, what else would they want to keep because they already played a tactic? So maybe the chances are pretty high they have an aggression, and so not building the knight, which is what I do instead of building a printing press, does definitely leave me significantly safer. I guess it's a matter of how much risk do you want to take. I think that, the game was early enough that it's hard to say who has the advantage. Looking at it now, though, I think playing the printing press this turn would be so big for me, as well. I don't actually end up using Cleo's resource this turn, as we'll see. So the printing press would have given me +1 rock, +2 science, which is a lot, and probably worth being potentially vulnerable to a double aggression. So I think I should have played the printing press this turn instead. Now I do something a little bit interesting with my military actions, which is I only build 1 knight and I don't play my phalanx tactic. The reason I did that is because I was planning on copying Sakic's medieval army tactic instead. The medieval army is just a generally more useful and flexible tactic than the phalanx, both for colonization and just because you can, with 4 units, you get a 4 bonus from the medieval army. In order to double up on phalanx, you need 6 units, and by then the medieval army is still worth as much, and actually +1 because you'll have 3 knights with the medieval army and only 2 knights with 2 phalanxes. So just in general, medieval army is a better tactic, especially when you don't have Jan Ziska. And so even though it would cost me an additional military action to copy the medieval army tactic, I thought that was worth it because I have the 3 military actions going for so long, and I also have library letting me keep extra cards in my hand, so it's less necessary to draw more cards each turn when I can keep more of them in my hand. So that's why I decided I didn't play the phalanx. Now, not building the warrior, I think the reason why I didn't build a warrior, and maybe this is also a reason why I didn't go for the printing press play, is because I wanted to leave myself open for a development of warfare, and if a development of warfare is revealed and I take it, then that would give me like a 3rd warrior if I built a warrior this turn, and that would feel a little bad, especially since I'm planning on copying medieval army. So instead I was leaving myself open for, if development of warfare is revealed, I'll build a 2nd knight instead, which is a lot stronger. Given that, I think this makes sense, but again, I think maybe the printing press would have been so powerful that it would have been worth building the 2nd warrior for it. Anyway, that being said, another advantage of this play is it gives me this theology. This is the second to last Happy Face solution on the deck after the Bread and Circuses. DB Starman. Now, DB Starman maybe doesn't need a Happy Face solution because they have Great Wall and the drama. Sakic has the Forbidden City and the drama. So maybe there's a good chance that I'll be able to get the Bread and Circuses. But I also will need a Happy Face solution pretty soon. And I don't know when the Bread and Circuses will come out or if it'll get cut. So being able to take the theology this turn is definitely a lot safer. So yeah, I think the printing press play is like the riskier play. It's higher upside, but higher downside. And this play is the safer play. But maybe the upside of the printing press this turn is so huge that it would have been worth it anyway. Anyway, I actually, I keep my phalanx just because I thought there was a chance that I still might want to play it this turn, because instead of copying the medieval army, and I discarded the Knowledge of the Ancients, partly because it would be a bit worse for me than for DB Starman, and also with Leonardo and Library of Alexandria, I would have a lot more science than my opponents, so I felt that the +2 or +3 science from Knowledge of the Ancients would be better for my opponents than it would be for me. And also, I probably won't want to siege for a little while anyway, because I'm probably going to be weakest for a little while. So I thought that keeping in an event card to potentially siege was not important. I drew a Reign of Terror and a fourth bonus card. DB Starman plays the Iron with the Development of Civil Life, takes a Masonry, which on the one hand will help them with the Great Wall and also other potential urban buildings. On the other hand, DB Starman is really low on science now, and so maybe this 3 science they're putting on the Masonry will end up costing them a fair amount. We'll see. They also upgrade 1 mine, so I'm not certain about the Masonry, but the rest of the turn looks good to me. They do pass up on the Code of Laws, but they don't have the science for it. So it makes sense. Socketch also doesn't seed, so event deck moving really slowly in this game. Instead, they, I think they play the Alchemy with the Development of Civil Life and then upgrade twice, and now they have science protection going. And choose to take Yanziska instead of, for example, the Code of Laws of the Monarchy. It is true that DB Starman hasn't taken an Age 1 leader yet, and Yanziska does look like he would be really good for them with the Great Wall and the Fighting Band. So taking this to make sure DB Starman doesn't get it also makes sense to me. And there is, as I said, a second copy of Code of Laws on the deck too, and Monarchy less useful when you're already on your 3rd military action. So this makes sense to me. Still keeping Ashoka around for the Ashoka bonus. This turn I do build a printing press. I felt appreciably safe enough to do this. And I increased my population to get out of corruption. So I think now the question is what to do with my last civil action. I could take one of these yellow cards or the Monarchy possibly, but I thought that it was better just to finish my farm upgrades, especially when you're on irrigations. You want to get those in as soon as possible because they'll start to run out of steam later, so the more food you can get earlier, the better off you'll be in terms of population. So I thought that was better than taking either of these yellow cards. I'm also only on 4 civil actions, so I need to be careful of spending my civil actions efficiently. I do also copy the medieval army tactic. Now I could build a second knight this turn in order to be strongest, but because there's still actually 2 cards to go in the event deck, I didn't see the Reign of Terror because again I didn't know if it would hit me. And I also really valued my population because I have 3 in urban buildings. Right, so I don't need to push strength this turn necessarily because the event deck is guaranteed not to be flipped until my following turn. And so for that reason, I also think it's justifiable perhaps to wait on the knight just to draw an extra card here. I'm going to be discarding my tactic now that I have this one as well as the Reign of Terror. So I prefer drawing an extra card here. You ideally want to avoid spending all your military actions in one turn if possible, just because it's better to get cards slower than like 0 cards one turn and 3 cards another turn, because then it's harder to keep all the cards in your hand that you want to keep. Anyway, I draw an aggression. DB Starman Seeds finally reveals the development of markets. They finished the Great Wall, so now they're pushing strength a lot. Take Joan of Arc, player, now they're a player, increase population, build a 4th warrior to put them up to 12 total strength. Joan of Arc, decent leader for them because of their 3rd military action. Unfortunately, both theologies are gone, so they're kind of going to be hoping for a organized religion soon. Isabella could also be considered, but if they didn't have any colonies seated, it makes sense why they were leery of Isabella. Socketch Seeds finally flipping the event deck, reveals development of settlement, which is definitely good for me. They elect Yanziska now because the age is about to end, build 2 knights to go up to 13 strength, so they're now the strongest. They take the 2nd copy of Code of Laws, have enough science to play it this turn, as well as take a breakthrough and an urban growth. Universal could be considered, but they're also still in bronze mines, and so it would probably be a while before they could complete Universalis, and there are some good H2 wonders, so it makes sense they didn't want to occupy their wonder slot. And instead took these yellow cards. This does fill up their hand, but they should be able to get these cards out of their hand relatively quickly, so that's probably okay. They could maybe consider maybe taking an alchemy instead of the iron instead of these yellow cards to make sure they have it, though they wouldn't be able to play the iron next turn, so maybe that would be bad. So yeah, I think this play is good. H2 begins. This was a tricky turn for me, so I don't need to fix my Happy Face solution this turn necessarily, but a Rebellion, which is definitely, well, maybe a Rebellion is unlikely because my opponents didn't fix the Happy Faces last turn, so it's probably not the Rebellion. But I do, if I want to, I do need to fix my Happy Face situation because I am really vulnerable to aggressions right now. So I need to put at least one population into military, and then, because I can't pop, that means I need to put another population into the Happy Face building. So I do have enough rocks, especially with Leonardo, to play Theology and build a Theology and a Knight. However, I decided to take this Bread and Circuses instead. I think there were two reasons for this, even though it's a bit of an expensive Bread and Circuses. One, I think it makes sense. The other ended up being a mistake. I'll cover the first one first. So there are some very important Bread and Circus synergies in this game, namely Darwin and Pierre. So the arenas are actually like pretty important to have in this game to leave myself. Well, maybe not super important because obviously there's just one leader in each age, but it still leaves me available for those leaders, which I think is very nice to have. And that's a good reason to take the Bread and Circuses even for two civil actions. Now, the other reason, let's look at my turn first. So we see that as a result of the Bread and Circuses, I'm able to go up to 8 strength. And so the other reason is I was thinking, if I had Theology instead of Bread and Circuses, I would only be at 7 strength. And while that would still let me defend against DB Starman, I thought that it would be difficult that DB Starman, if DB Starman, I would be pretty vulnerable to a double aggression there. Where DB Starman could aggress me when I'm at 7, and I would have to put 2 bonus cards into it, and then I wouldn't be able to defend myself against Sakich. Whereas now if DB Starman aggresses me, I can protect myself only with 1 bonus card, and then I thought I would be able to defend against Sakich because I actually forgot that there's an open borders agreement between me and Sakich. Meaning if Sakich aggresses me, they'll actually be at 15 strength, which means the only way I'll be able to defend myself is if I draw an H2 bonus card right now. So that on my end was a definite mistake. Now, what would the alternative have been? Perhaps playing the Theology instead and building one would have given me 2 extra civil actions that I could use to take possibly the Universe's House, although I think it's not great for me for the same reasons that I stated for Sakich. But I could also potentially take an Alchemy, although maybe, you know, I do have the printing press, but maybe the Alchemy might be good as a sort of compensation for the printing press, or as a way to give me sufficient science income along with the printing press. Although 2 Alchemy, 1 printing press, 1 library is probably pretty good, especially if I get a second printing press going. I think the major advantage was I would have been able to get an iron this turn, and I would have, I think, I would have been at -2 rocks. I've been at 4 next turn. So playing the iron would put me at 5. So I'd need to find another science or maybe a resource event from the deck to be able to upgrade the iron 2 times next turn. That being said, the iron, it would still be nice to take. I mean, it's at the end of age 1, so you could also say wait for coal. On the other hand, Sakich is playing before me, so Sakich might also be planning on getting coal, which means that if Sakich gets the coal, I'll have to wait longer to get the coal. So I do think that instead of this arena, playing the Theology, taking the iron would be a very defensible line, maybe a better one. Like I said, the arena is good for these 2 leaders, but I don't know if I get those leaders, and so maybe the Theology getting me the iron, which would guarantee me a way to upgrade my mines next turn, would be better than doing this arena play and kind of hoping I'll get a coal sometime soon. Like I said, I think half of the reason for this arena play was my mistake, so for that reason, maybe I should have done Theology Iron instead. I draw Politics of Strength and an International Trade Agreement, always a nice card to see in your hand. DB Starman Siege reveals any deposits. neutral event, at least. DB Starman finishes upgrading their mines, also builds a temple, and takes an alchemy. Instead of taking the alchemy, they could have maybe built a drama, or maybe just not worried about the happy faces yet, because the temple is not freeing up any extra workers, right? It's pretty much just giving them a little bit of culture and protecting them from rebellion. Yeah, so maybe either playing Jama, or I guess the civil action they save from building the temple, maybe, and they could have taken a rich land possibly for selective breedings. Yeah, I wouldn't have done this, but I can understand. I mean, I still, but again, I'm not sure. It looks like rebellion probably isn't in the deck, so the temple, however, does give them +1 strength for Zhone, so maybe that does make it so that they'll be strongest on their turn when they seed. So I guess that makes it a good play to a pretty decent use of the civil action. Anyway, Sakach seeds reveals that wealthy territory I played. I wasn't willing to put too much into it, which means Sakach can win it. I only bid 4. The reason being that I would only be able to rebuild this night, right? So if I won it, I would still be on 8 strength on my following turn with 2 less bonus cards, which meant that DB Starman would be able to, well, I would still, yeah, so if I put 3 bonus cards into it, then unless I drew a bonus card in my turn, DB Starman would be able to do an aggression against me, and I thought that was too risky, so I was only willing to bid 2 bonus cards, which would at least protect me from a DB Starman aggression, which wasn't enough, so Sakach was able to win this colony. On the other hand, that maybe, well, we'll see what they do. So they take the rich land, and yeah, they rebuild their knight, so Sakach winning the colony for only 1 knight is definitely good for them. They also were able to take the Ocean Liner service. I wasn't able to take this on my turn because I just fixing my happy face and strength situations was more important. So that means, unfortunately, Sakach is able to take it, and they're able to get out of corruption by building a 2nd warrior. So this is definitely a good turn from Sakach, and thanks to the wealthy territory, they'll be able to actually finish the Ocean Liner service next turn, even though they're in bronze mines. So the wealthy territories I seeded ended up being extremely helpful for my opponents, sadly. Now, at this point, I am willing to give up my extra military action to get this international trade agreement going. I take the food instead of the rocks because I'll be operating off of irrigations, and we can see now I'll have to get coal. I thought that the extra food giving me more population would be more important than extra rocks, especially since I have Leonardo giving me extra rocks right now, and also I want to get more printing presses at some point, which will require extra population. So for those reasons, I thought food was more important. I offered the DB Starman instead of Sakach because I thought that, partly because, mostly I think because DB Starman is on iron, so going from 6 to 7 isn't as big a deal as Sakach going from 3 to 4. And I also felt that with Sakach having the Ocean Liner service, and also just, yeah, mainly the Ocean Liner service, and also being stronger, and also having 2 more civil actions, I thought that Sakach was in a stronger position than DB Starman, so I preferred giving DB Starman the benefit. Anyway, I increased my population, and I built a 2nd arena to fix my happy faces completely, and that also enables me to build a 2nd army, which finally protects me from aggressions. Thankfully, Sakach did not aggress me during the turns when they could have. As for my remaining 2 civil actions, we can see there are some notable leaders on the row. James Watt, you know, could be considered, but probably not since I have irrigations. Newton could definitely be considered as maybe Bach, although, you know, there's an opera in the row, so maybe I could hope for Bach. But I think in this case, I definitely want Darwin here. I think Darwin being available so early and for only 1 civil action on my turn definitely justifies me taking the arenas. I think the reason why I got the printing press and arena, one reason is that Darwin is in the deck as synergy for them. So I think that Darwin is a very strong leader for me. I've also just in general come to respect more the value of culture leaders, especially in, obviously in 2-player games, but even in 3-player games, I think culture leaders can be good, especially a culture leader like Darwin, who also gives you a 2nd benefit of saving you civil actions sometimes. So I thought that Darwin would be very good for me. Now, I actually chose to elect him this turn. The reason being that I really wanted Darwin, but I didn't really want... I mean, I could consider taking the architecture, but I was a little bit worried about my science situation with only having 4 now once I get Darwin. Maybe 5 if I get another printing press, but it'll be hard getting more than 5. I wasn't sure if I would be able to afford the architecture. Also, I wasn't sure if I would be getting Age 2 urban buildings at all, and the savings it would give me on the printing press wasn't very exciting. So I didn't really feel great about the architecture, or the theocracy. Maybe the theocracy could be good. It would give me a third military action, but I was looking forward to an Age 2 government form, especially in a 3-player game. So the reason I elected Darwin this turn is he let me take this Republic. Republic definitely not an ideal. I would definitely much prefer the Kanman. Unfortunately, the Kanman is... I am not able to take the Kanman this turn while doing the other things that I felt that I really were more important. So I took the Republic, even though chances are probably good, I would rather have the Kanman, because I'm not taking this Kanman, which means my opponents could very well take it. I will have enough science to get a government form next turn. I thought that if one of my opponents took the Kanman, I'd definitely rather just have the Republic in my hand so I could play it next turn, so that I would get those civil actions. Even with only 2 military actions, I could hope to get the strategy, especially with Darwin, getting the strategy maybe is more likely. But also just in general, like, an early Republic, even if you only had 2 military actions, is, I think, still better than a late Kanman. So that's why I want to take the Republic, just ensure I would be able to play a government next turn. I discard the Politics of Strength, and I have to discard a bonus card now because I lost a military action. I didn't see because I was weakest, and I drew an aggression. DB Starman Seeds reveals a card of arms, and fortunately it hits me. At least I'll be playing a government next turn to compensate a little bit. DB Starman builds a lab directly. Maybe this is what they were planning on doing by not building their second philosophy, but not building the second philosophy for so long definitely cost them a significant amount of science. At least that leaves the Kanman on 2 civil actions for Sakich. Sakich Seeds reveals the inhabited territory. This one I was willing to bid more on because it'll be easier for me to rebuild the army. Also just so, yeah, I'll be able to rebuild the army, so I wasn't too concerned. Sakich is not really in a position to get much more strength because they have no more free, happy population. So I felt safe putting a lot into that colony, and thankfully I ended up winning it. Unfortunately, Sakich is able to get the first copy of coal, which they take. At least it's expensive for 3 civil actions. They choose to upgrade the coal instead of finishing the ocean liner service, and they take Bach. Bach will pair well with the drama, but while I think this play makes sense for Sakich to get the coal upgrades going quickly, I was also happy to see it because it meant that the Kanman was still available for me. I did seed... I forgot. That was a Prosperity. So I seeded the Prosperity even though I'm weakest because I wanted the Prosperity in the deck. Obviously, I have more happy faces than my opponents, and I also think I could really use the extra food. So I thought that it was important to get that card in the deck. Unfortunately, it reveals another strength event that hits me, and kind of, well, on the one hand, it's bad that it got revealed, but at least seeing the Prosperity is still good because it kind of compensates for being hit by the Barbarians. Anyway, like I said, I do definitely prefer the Kanman over the Republic because the Republic would only leave me with 2 military actions. So this made me feel significantly safer in terms of aggressions, especially after, well, I could still defend, but, in the long term, just 4 military actions is significantly better than 2. So I think this all is pretty obvious plays. So what to do with my last civil action? I could consider the Opera, but with still only being in bronze mines without having that much science production, I thought and with Darwin, I probably would rather put my population into printing presses instead of operas. I could consider the Cavalryman, but I thought the wave of nationalism would be more likely. Like I said, especially with still being on bronze mines, any extra rocks I can get could be very important. I'm still weakest, so I will definitely be able to get full value out of this, and it's just a strong card, I think, when you get full value out of it. I draw an Independence Declaration, a H2 Tactic, and a Terrorism. The Terrorism, probably neither of these events I'll be able to seed, though. TB Starman Seeds reveals the Crusades. This also hits me, unfortunately, so I've been hit by 3 strength events this game. That's the risk you take when you are weakest, though. TB Starman is able to get some farm upgrades going, at least. So, well, I say at least. I don't know why, but yeah, TB Starman gets some farm upgrades going, so that makes sense to me. Sakich steals, reveals a foray, which I'm not a party of, so that's, I think, 4 strength events so far that I basically lost. Sakich finishes the Ocean Line of Service this turn, which makes sense. And they build a 4th Knight, which gives them a 4th Tactic with Jan Ziska, putting them up to 18 strength, as well as taking a Breakthrough and a Reserves. They have 6 civil actions. We'll get... So, the Reserves is probably justified. The Frugality would be bad for them because they have Ocean Line of Service, so... yeah, I understand this turn. It makes sense. I don't want either of these cards in the deck, and I'm the weakest anyway. I take the Statue of Liberty. Now, there is a Harvard College on the road that would be better for me. The problem is it's available for 4 civil actions, which is a lot, and I thought that chances were pretty high that either DB Starman or Sakich would take the Harvard College. And so if I didn't take the Statue of Liberty, I'd probably... I mean, Eiffel Tower and Louvre, maybe. I think Statue of Liberty, especially since I have an H2 government form, is good. The extra yellow tokens will also be highly valuable to me, with wanting to get more printing presses, ideally soon, and also just being on irrigations. So I think the Statue of Liberty will be a strong winner for me. It also... Another very important reason, though, maybe the most important reason I took the Statue of Liberty, is it gives me a way to get out of corruption. As we can see, I am 1 food short of being able to increase my population, which means that if I don't have a very obvious way to get out of corruption. I don't have enough science to play the Cavalryman. I could play the selective breeding, but that felt bad. You know, maybe, and I didn't have enough science for the scientific method. So basically, if I didn't take and build one stage with the Statue of Liberty, in order to get out of corruption, I would have to destroy something. And that was really bad. And so I thought that not only is Statue a good wonder for me, it's especially good because it gives me a way to get out of corruption. So it kinda effectively only cost me 10 instead of 12. So with that consideration, I think this is definitely the right play. Now the question is what else to do with my remaining 3 civil actions. I kinda, as stated previously, all I can really do is take some cards, and I take the efficient upgrade. This I think is a necessary card for me because I'll only have 3 rocks next turn. So if I want to be able to upgrade a core next turn, which I definitely want to be able to, this efficient upgrade is necessary. So as for the last card, I take the reserves. I could consider taking the frugality, but if we think ahead to the coal, right? So next turn, if I upgrade a coal with efficient upgrade, I'll have 5 rocks, which is 1 rock short of being able to upgrade another one the following turn. So I will need some additional source of rocks in 2 turns in order to get a second coal upgrade earlier. I could hope to get maybe the Richland or the second efficient upgrade, but that's speculative. They might not show up. My opponents might take them. The reserves guarantees me being able to potentially get a second coal upgrade in 2 turns. The alternative, major alternative might have been the frugality. This also would certainly be a good card that should be strongly considered, but, you know, reserves I could also potentially use for food too. You know, it costs an extra civil action over the frugality, but, you know, I have 6, which is a decent amount, and so the fact that this will help me get coal upgrades and also maybe get me food if I decide I need food, I think probably does make it better than the frugality overall in my situation. I draw another bonus card, a Napoleonic Army Tactic, which I was happy to see should be easier to transition into that one, as well as another strength event, international negotiations. DB Starman increases the population, takes an organized religion, and is able to get out of corruption by upgrading it. So good thing from them. Unfortunately, though, they are still on 4 civil actions, and there's no clear path to getting more soon. Well, I guess there is with Robespierre, and they can hope. It's pretty risky not to take Robespierre, but it is possible that Robespierre will be available for them in the next turn. I think Robespierre is probably an essential leader for DB Starman to finally get more civil actions. This does, however, fix their happy face situation and give them a bit extra strength with Shown, so I understand this play too. It also fixes their corruption. Sakich upgrades a coal, takes the Harvard College after all, and takes a patriotism. Sensible turn, I think. Takes the patriotism over the breakthrough, notably, but they do have a lot of science, so yeah. They are still in despotism, though, but they have 6 civil actions. And I was very thankful to see the coal show up here, and it's even a cheaper coal for me because I have Darwin, so that's nice. I really want to get my coal upgrades going ASAP, so I think this is this is the best. This is a good thing to do. I think this is almost not questionable. So the real question is with my last 2 civil actions. That is a more interesting choice. There are a few notable options here. One is this journalism. So I think printing press to journalism is by far the best age 1 to age 2 upgrade you can do, because journalism doubles the production of printing press, whereas the other options only move you from 2 to 3, right? So I think journalism should actually be a strong consideration for me right now. It would also help me with my science situation, which is looking a bit difficult right now. I could also, I think what I end up doing, though, is taking the cannons and the breakthrough. Cannons is probably more important because I have both of my H2 tactics require cannons. So for that reason, I think cannons is a necessary card. So yeah, this definitely I needed to take. As for the breakthrough, like I said, journalism could be considered, urban growth could be considered, but I was feeling pretty bad about my science at this current point in time, and I also thought that with my cool upgrades going soon, probably the urban growth, the rocks and the urban growth will be less important than the science from breakthrough. It's also not as clear when I'll be able to use the urban growth as opposed to the breakthrough. I mean, I probably will want to build another urban building at some point, but the breakthrough is still more immediately obvious, and like I said, I think science will be more difficult for me than rocks, especially since I already have 2 rock yellow cards in my hands. And also for those reasons, journalism would be good, but the breakthrough kinda gives me a similar, I mean, it gives me 3 science, which would take the journalism much longer to give me, and it doesn't cost, resources to build. So I think the breakthrough does look right for me. Now, however, there is probably another thing I could have done with my last civil action that I should have considered more strongly, which was increasing my population. And we'll see why on DB Starman's turn I discard, I think an aggression and strength event. But DB Starman sees and reveals the rats, the last age 1 event on the deck, and it costs me a really big amount. To be quite frank, I think I just didn't really consider that. Because it's so late in age 2, it kind of didn't enter my mind that rats was still a possibility. But obviously, like, everyone could see there was this age 1 event left on the deck, so I really should have considered rats, and for that reason, I think increasing my population would have been better than the breakthrough. But I did not do that, unfortunately. DB Starman, the Robespierre is available for them after all, so I think Robespierre is certainly very, very strong for them. I think they don't play him this term, though, because they spent their science on finally playing the swordsman in their hands before it gets lost to the end of the age, potentially. So that also makes sense. They upgrade 3 of their warriors to swordsmen. That's all the rocks they can spend and take a journalism. Unfortunately, this play does leave them in corruption. I think that, maybe, I think upgrading agriculture to selective breeding instead of taking the journalism, perhaps. Yeah, because the other 3 civil actions are probably necessary, but I think instead of this journalism, upgrading a farm to get out of corruption might have been better. Again, I do see the logic of the journalism. It is a good card, but it's also not clear, even with selective breedings, if they'll have the free population for the journalism necessarily. And again, it leaves them in corruption. Anyway, Suckage Seeds reveals the prosperity that I seeded, so that at least makes up for the rats a teeny bit. Lex Bach plays a classic army, plays the Jamba before the end of the age, especially important with Bach, obviously. Finally upgrades a farm, takes a rifleman, builds a theater, takes a rich land for the coal, and builds a second theater. I wonder if perhaps, let's see, instead of taking this rich land that costs them a civil action, which they don't have an amount of, finding a way to build a second coal upgrade, perhaps instead of the second theater and maybe playing the reserves, would have a second coal upgrade. Upgrading the last coal this turn would give them only 1 rock less than taking this rich land, and it would save them a civil action. So I think that probably would have been better if they could find a line that let them do that. As for my turn, I still don't see it because I'm weakest. I play reserves for rocks, which, as I stated, one of the reasons I took this is because it would let me do precisely this, get a second core upgrade going this turn. I also really wanted the rifleman because I was aiming for that Napoleonic army in my hand. I am also able to, after taking the engineering genius, play it this turn and play the wave of nationalism, which gives me enough to upgrade 2 soldiers to riflemen, which leaves me not the weakest. Now, I think that makes sense. The questionable play in this turn of taking the engineering genius. It is true that I can use it immediately on the Statue of Liberty, which is quite strong. On the other hand, I'm giving up notably the strategy, which is a little bit questionable. Now, I think the reason I gave up the strategy was because I am still only on 4 science, and I'm gonna want to play probably the cannon next turn for my Napoleonic army. And so at that point, I'll be on 1 science and then +4 to get to 5, and I still won't be able to play the strategy. And then by the next turn, it'll be pretty deep into H3. I might want to spend my science on H3 text. So the 8 science cost of the strategy was pretty significant for me at this point in time, and I think that's why I decided that engineering genius was more important, because I thought that maybe I wouldn't have the science to play the strategy anyway. That logic still makes sense to me. I think it's probably pretty close. The strategy is definitely a rough cut to give up, though, especially with draw run and when you can take it for 1 civil action like this. So, yeah, I think it's close. Discard tactic, I won't use aggression. Draw a wealthy territory and a spy. H3 begins. Oh, I forgot to look at the state of the game after H1. I'll do it after DB Starman's turn here. Okay, DB Starman. It's a little funny. There's been 3 scientific cooperation pacts potential between me and DB Starman in this group. Both times DB Starman has offered it to me, I've rejected it. And the one time I offered it to DB Starman accepted it. Now, I think in the last game when I rejected the scientific cooperation, that was probably wrong in retrospect. This, though, I had a very direct reason for rejecting it, even though on the surface it seems like it would be an equal pact for us. Because you'll see DB Starman has 4 science. And with Robespierre, let's say that I had accepted and scientific cooperation was active. This Republic Revolution would cost them 0 science. And then this journalism would cost them 4 science. Which means they could have, on their turn, done the Republic Revolution and played the journalism and built a journalism. And that felt like really strong for me. I think right now, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but right now I think DB Starman is in the weakest position in our group in this game. But if DB Starman was able to get the Republic and the journalism going this turn, I think that could turn around really quickly, and they might actually get to be the strongest, or at least compete with me and Sakich more. And I thought that potential of DB Starman being able to get Republic and journalism this turn was way stronger than any benefit I would get from the scientific cooperation. And that's why I rejected it. Now, DB Starman is still able to get a revolution, but as we can see now, they aren't able to play the journalism. Instead, they take the strategy I didn't, as well as a justice system, increase their population, do that farm upgrade, and take a revolutionary idea. Unfortunately, they are still in corruption. They let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they could have gotten out of corruption by, instead of taking this revolutionary idea, building a 3rd lab. Oh wait, no, because of masonry, that's only 5. 1, 2. Yeah, so, okay, they could have, yeah, that wouldn't have been enough. They would have had to build a 3rd lab and maybe like another temple or something. Which I guess they'll need another temple at some, this will have to go into a temple anyway because the next population will be unhappy. So maybe that wouldn't be the end of the world, and that would perhaps be better than taking this revolutionary idea. But, yeah, corruption is kind of becoming an issue for DB Starman in this game. Sakich, takes the Kanman and plays it, which makes sense. At least I got a much earlier Kanman than Sakich did. Plays a rifleman with patriotism to now become strongest, especially with that classic army tactic. Finishes up winning the coals, as well as playing reserves for rocks, which also get a 3rd theater. Oh, okay. So let's take a look at the situation of the game before Sakich ends their turn. So in terms of culture, well, we can see that Sakich is getting to be ahead of culture now. So the culture values, the culture amounts that we all have are pretty equal right now. So it's looking like Sakich will start boosting culture. On the other hand, I will also be able to boost culture pretty soon with the Statue of Liberty and perhaps more printing presses. So I think culture between me and Sakich is about the same. DB's Drummond is going to be behind in culture. In terms of science, it's literally the same. In terms of rocks, DB's Drummond has more rocks going earlier than we did because of the irons, but that advantage has been lost the past few turns because of corruption. I think DB's Drummond is now piling up rocks, largely because they weren't able to get an opportunity to get an H2 wonder, I think. So now now that Sakich and I have built up coals, I think the rock situation is looking pretty equal, if not in Sakich and I's favor. As for food, DB's Drummond has selective biddings going, but I have irrigations plus the international trade agreement plus the Statue of Liberty, and Sakich has the Ocean Liner Service. So I think like population food, Yellow Bank is also pretty equal between us. And civil military actions, we can see after that Kanmon, Sakich now has more civil and military actions than the rest of us. So I think probably DB's Drummond is in the weakest position, partly because they've had these corruption issues, partly because we can see they're still in Swordsman and Fighting Band, which even with Great One Colossus, there's still a limit to that. So, and DB's Drummond is going to be behind in culture without really an economic advantage to show for it. So I think DB's Drummond is in the weakest position, not by that much. They still have a chance to come back, but they need to find a way to get their economy going, you know, get something going in H3 pretty soon. Whereas Sakich and I think, are pretty similar. Sakich, I think, has a advantage, though, mainly because of their civil and military actions now. So I think Sakich does have an advantage over me for that reason, but it's not a huge advantage, and I think that either of us could still win this game, and DB's Drummond is not far enough behind that they have no hopes of winning this game either if things go their way. Anyway, Sakich also takes this navigation, which perhaps suggests there's colonies in the deck. I seed, now that I'm not weakest, I was comfortable seeding, and I seeded that was a territory, I believe. Maybe not the smartest seed since Sakich just took the navigation, but I also have some bonus cards in my hand, so it could be fine still. And I think I just wanted to seed why I wasn't the weakest too, and I felt it was too risky to seed these strength events because it's, you know, DB's Drummond could still potentially, you know, I didn't know when I would get more strength. Maybe I should have seeded one of them though, especially perhaps the international negotiations, because with the Napoleonic army tactic, maybe it is more likely than I perhaps thought that I'll be able to push strength earlier, and with Sakich having the navigation. Although Sakich maybe won't be able to play the navigation, although they will have the Harvard College going soon, so maybe I could aim to get the satellites, but I think I won't take the satellites this turn. I finished upgrading my coals as well as finish the Statue of Liberty with Engineering Genius. No reason not to do these plays this turn, I think. I can also finally build a second printing press. I have enough. I have the population to do that now. So I think those are all natural plays. I think the question is now, do I want any of these cards on the row? Efficient upgrade, I don't think so. It's not clear that I'll be upgrading another building this game. I think the other cards, not super exciting. Opera, maybe, but there's not. Charlie Chaplin is the only opera synergy, kind of, and probably won't be getting for Chaplin. Maybe I could get an opera in preparation for Hollywood, but I think there are other strong H3 winners I could take instead of Hollywood. So I think opera is probably not a great card for me. Mechanized agriculture is a possibility, but I felt pretty comfortable with my food situation at this point, and I thought that I didn't really need to upgrade from irrigations, especially, you know, with the statue, with international trade agreement giving me food. I thought I didn't really need that much more food. Military build-up, maybe, though I was pretty happy with my rocks, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to get weaker than DB's Drummond. I could consider taking satellites, especially since I seeded that colony, though. That definitely would be a strong possibility, but instead I decided to just build even a third library. This at least ties me in culture production with Sakich, which is nice, and obviously gives me a bit more science production. So, I think there is a lot of justification to do this as well. Instead of taking one of these cards from the row. Especially since maybe the satellites is the major alternative, but next turn I probably want to play the cannons instead of the satellites, and then by the next turn won't even really need the satellites anymore. It's a little bit of a you know, I also would only have 5 science production, so I probably maybe want to save my science for other cards in H3 possibly. So I think this play also makes sense. I adopt the classic army tactic. That moves me from, I forget how much strength I had. That gave me +4. So it moved me from 16 to 20, mainly as a way to help ensure I won't be weaker than DB Starman after DB Starman's turn. Even though this gives me 1 less military card draw, I thought that, like I said, that guarantee I won't be weaker than DB Starman, and was more important. It was also possible I might want to operate off of classic armies instead of Napoleonic armies. I draw an H3 tactic and an aggression. DB Starman plays the revolutionary idea to play the strategy, and is able to finish the Eiffel Tower. Unfortunately, they are still in corruption, but I do think the Eiffel Tower is good for them, because my basic stance on the Eiffel Tower is, if the happy face is useful for you, it's a good wonder. Not, you know, the greatest wonder perhaps, but it's good, it's useful. And we can see that DB Starman, the happy face will be useful for it, because it'll save them from having to build another temple, at least in the next few turns. And they are they able to get out of corruption? Yeah, by building 2 swordsmen. So, putting a lot of their population into swordsmen, unfortunately, but it is enough for them to now become strongest, at least. So maybe adopting the classic army tactic wasn't the best on my end. Now Sakash declares a war against me. It's a war over territory. Because, as we can see, after finally opening the second farm, they are able to get 2 classic army tactics going. That does, however, come at a significant cost to them, which is they have to destroy one of their labs, one of their alchemies, to not be in uprising. So I think this is a pretty, this is quite a costly war for Sakich, because destroying this alchemy is really costly. On the other hand, it is true that they only have 4 turns left of Ocean Liner Service, and this can be one of the weaknesses of Ocean Liner Service if you get it too early. It's obviously a very strong wonder, but sometimes you do get in this situation where if you get it and you don't get any yellow token colonies or, you know, any other source of yellow tokens, then you can run out of your yellow bank before the game's over, which is a bad position to be in. So I can understand this war from that perspective, where it means that Sakich will almost certainly not run out of yellow bank before the game is over, and I can see, like, from their position, it looks like I won't be able to get that much strength going on my turn. They also take a mechanized agriculture to prepare. Well, I mean, after this war, they probably won't actually need more food, but I guess, yeah, there's a Red Cross, so they're probably thinking of getting a Red Cross, perhaps. Taking efficient upgrades for the mechanized agriculture, presumably, as well as the computers. The efficient upgrade can also be as computers, though they destroyed one of their labs already, so I'm not sure about the second copy. I will say, I kind of feel if you're taking computers here, you probably should take Bill Gates. And maybe if you're taking Bill Gates, you won't destroy your lab, but I think Bill Gates' computers being available this early for Sakich would be extremely strong. Really, really strong. And, potentially game-winning to get that combo. I think that, neither were available on my turn, I forget. But, yeah, I think this Bill Gates' computers being available at the beginning of Age 3, I think, like, something... There has to be, like, a really, really good reason not to take them because of how strong a combo that is, and I don't think these cards, instead, are good enough to not do that. So that's how I would criticize Sakich's turn here. Anyway, I am able to defend myself pretty well and save myself some yellow tokens by putting a cannon, destroying one of my labs, at least it's a philosophy and not an alchemy, to buy the second cannon, and I play the Napoleonic army, which means that I will only lose 1 yellow token to Sakich. So, holding the Napoleonic army back in reserve kind of ended up benefiting me here. Maybe copying the classic army tactic also led Sakich to believe I didn't have an H2 tactic in my hand. That's what I didn't consider, that bluff value of copying tactics. I'm not sure if that made a difference in Sakich's turn, but it might have. Anyway, as for my remaining 3 civil actions after doing it, I am definitely not in a position to take Bill Gates, unfortunately. So the question is what to do instead, and I end up taking the multimedia. I was kind of looking towards, okay, how do I win this game? And, you know, I'm kind of keeping up with Sakich in terms of culture, but that won't necessarily be true for much longer. I mean, Sakich is kind of a little bit pulling ahead of me in culture. So I thought one way of me winning this game was by getting some multimedias, which would not only get me even more culture, would also get me more science production, which would be good because of the spaceflight that's on the deck, and the Manhattan Project, potentially. So I think the multimedia is a good card for me. I mean, I already have these 3 printing presses, so it's easier for me to upgrade them into multimedias. That's just in general a strong card. There's no... it also would be good if I get Steve Jobs, for example, which I was definitely considering, especially with calls. So I do think getting the multimedia this turn makes sense. And for my remaining 2 civil action, take the revolutionary idea. I'm still kind of pretty short on science for H3 standards. So 1 civil action, revolutionary idea in particular, I think is really strong. I really wanted it. And as for my remaining civil action, I took the civil service. I didn't take the satellite still, even though I seeded that colony. I think I just probably shouldn't have seeded the colony. But the civil service, I mean, I was a little worried about, 6 civil actions is fine, but, obviously the more the better. And I thought that with the revolutionary idea, I could potentially afford the civil service, and that would just let me just ride this for the rest of the game, basically. I thought that was good. I did pass up the military theory, though, unfortunately. It is an extra civil action, so I would have had to give up one of these cards in order to take the military theory. And I thought that, I think military theory would be better for me than civil service, but I thought civil service plus revolutionary idea, that this was too important and this was too important to take the military theory. There's also going to be a second copy that I was likely to get with Darwin, so. Discard my aggression and draw the exact same aggression. Deepest German offers me a military alliance. This pact I was happy to accept. Unfortunately, I still lose the war. But I was still happy to accept it. Deepest German gets those journalisms going, and Deepest German takes Bill Gates. Unfortunately, there's no computers with it, or scientific methods, but there is a second copy of computers in the deck. Also, it makes sense that they've, used up Robespierre's value in getting the revolution, so they do want to get another H3 leader going as soon as they can. We can see that maybe Nelson Mandela probably would have been better, but the Eiffel Tower is kind of anti-synergy with Mandela. So that's something I hadn't considered, but should keep in mind from now on. There's a little bit of anti-synergy here. I don't know how relevant that should be in decision-making, but it matters a little bit. Takes the engineering genius and a patriotism, as well as increasing their population. Just yellow cards. Yeah, I can see why they probably... I mean, they don't have a lot of science, so it's tough to get techs. Maybe they're aiming for Manhattan Project. Sokich finishes the Harvard College, takes the first copy of Air Forces from the row, also takes a democracy. They don't have enough science for it next turn, maybe, but they do. I mean, they do have, we can see the destroying this lab starting to really cost them. They have all these techs in their hands. Maybe they see the Cold War or something, though. But the war, interestingly, this probably suggests that there's a colony in the deck that they want to send this away to. Maybe also freedom of movement, that they built this with a military action and then move it to something else, like a lab, saving themselves a civil action. And they take that military theory that I don't. My turn, I'm not weakest. I was willing to cede the Independence Declaration. It would be pretty hurtful to me if I lost it, but I thought that DB Starman, the Great Wall is starting to run out of steam when you're only operating off of fighting bands, so thought that, I could avoid it landing on me, and even if it did hit me and I lost 2 yellow tokens, maybe that wouldn't be the absolute end of the world. I'm kind of running a bit low on yellow tokens anyway. I revealed developed territory. Maybe I should have seeded the international negotiations instead, though, but I didn't want to benefit Sokich. That was the race to seed. I wanted to seed when I wasn't the weakest, and I also knew there were colonies in the deck. And I didn't want to seed an event that would benefit Sokich, because Sokich felt like my main competition. Anyway, I am able to win this colony, thankfully, and not for that much either, just for a night. I was willing, yeah, just for a night. So that was nice. And that, the extra 5 science, so this is, as also we'll see, a pretty, an extremely fortunate event to be revealed at this exact time, because the 5 science will be just enough for me to play democracy this turn, which after rebuilding my knight, I decided to do instead of doing any multimedia stuff. The multimedia instead could definitely have been considered, but, the democracy is giving me more of a culture, a bit more of a culture boost. Now, the multimedia will give me a science boost, obviously, but there's also a chance maybe I won't even upgrade multimedias. I might decide that my rocks are better spent elsewhere. So this kind of delays my decision making on like what urban buildings what might I invest my resources into, and also just in general, given the extra civil action I get from it is nice. Maybe it's not worth it though. Another reason though to take the democracy is the urban building limit. I thought might be relevant. I could get a 4th library with it, for example, or there's a Pierre in the deck that I was aiming for, and the democracy would get me a 4th arena. So I do think the urban building limit is actually extremely relevant for me because I have these cheap urban buildings that I'm kind of relying on for culture. So democracy makes sense from that perspective too. We'll see also what I do with my extra civil actions from having democracy, which I take the reserves, which will be a very nice card for me, especially since it will let me increase my population potentially next turn. I am also able to take this patriotism, which I was a little worried about my strength situation because Sakich has air forces and I don't. Well, I do play before TV Storm and I don't know when the second copy of air forces will come out, so I might have to operate on this game without any air forces, which is pretty concerning, leaves me a little bit vulnerable. I mean, Sakich has the military theory too to potentially get a big war going, so I thought the patriotism left me a lot safer from any potential wars from Sakich. And with my last full action, I take this copy of movies. Now, this is a little bit of like a potential card for me, maybe, but realistically speaking, it's largely a denial. Because if we pay attention to Sakich, right? Well, because the second copy of movies is on the road right now. And by taking my turn this way, this copy of movies will actually move to be 1 civil action for DB Starman. So I thought that by doing it this way, I thought there was a good chance DB Starman would not take the second copy of movies, which would then deny movies to Sakich, which I thought was very important because Sakich is actually running out of ways to increase the culture production. They got a fair amount of culture production pretty quickly, but now they're stalling out a little bit, whereas I still have extra potential with another printing press, with maybe Pierre and arenas. Whereas Sakich at this point, other than the democracy, the only way they have of increasing their culture production is movies or multimedia. And so and especially with Bach making the movies cheaper, I thought that denying Sakich the movies potentially might actually be really important and cost them a fair bit of culture. So the democracy play instead of the multimedia play also let me get all these cards, and I do think all of these cards, I do think these 3 cards are all potentially extremely valuable for me, or you know, these for me and these as a denial. So I think that the democracy play, while it definitely has its weaknesses, also has its strengths, and I think it's at least a defensible line to take. I draw an Impact of Competition and 2 wars. DB builds a library, takes the rockets, and does take the second copy of movies after all. So after seeing this, I was quite happy with making the decision to take this one. They also take a revolutionary idea, as well as an Emerald Growth. Just take a lot of yellow cards too, which I guess they don't have that much else to do in their turn. So these yellow cards should be helpful for them to get some urban buildings. Sakich declares another war over territory, this time against DB Starman. Is able to build an air forces to help with that, and takes this Hollywood. Oh yeah, another reason why I thought it was pretty important to take the movies is because I wasn't taking the Hollywood because it's really bad for me, and so I wanted to limit, and so it felt like, you know, pretty likely that Sakich would take the Hollywood. So I wanted to limit the potential impact of the Hollywood as much as possible. And so not only does denying Sakich the movies cost them culture production, it'll also cost them a lot of culture from completing the Hollywood. They take an efficient upgrade and float a civil action. Notably, they don't take this copy of multimedia, which I'll talk about a bit more in my turn. I do take the second copy of military theory now that it's on the row. Thought that it would make me, you know, I should have the science to play it probably with the revolutionary idea and stuff. So, and I think I might take the second copy too. Thought that it was important just to guarantee Sakich. I mean, Sakich is threatening a fair amount of strength, so I wanted to make sure I could defend myself even without an air forces. I do play the revolutionary idea, and I can play it this turn. Another reason I really wanted it, though, is for aggression protection. Because with playing the military theory this turn, with 1 bonus card, I can defend against an aggression. Now, I don't actually have a bonus card in my hand right now, But I thought that it would at least, not only do I have a chance to draw it, but it might discourage Sakich from using an aggression against me if I would only need one bonus card to defend myself. Because, you know, there's a decent chance, I'm not sure if any bonus cards have been spent yet. Any age, yeah, I think, yeah, no age 3 bonus cards have been played yet this game. So chances seemed high that I'd have one in my hand. So I thought that this should discourage Sakich from aggressing me. I also think the Pierre, very well set up for him. I've talked about it a couple times in this game. Another advantage of that arena play, Brendan Circus is a play way back when. Very strong leader, I think, for me in this situation. Is going to give me a lot of culture. Especially since I'm getting Pierre at the end of age 3. Pierre is one of the best leaders to get at the end of age 3 because, you know, the Olympic Games is like one of the best parts about him, and it only takes one turn. I used my last action to take the revolutionary idea instead of building more arenas for Pierre, unfortunately. But I think the second revolutionary idea is extremely good for me. It'll let me play a multimedia, civil service, whatever I decide I want to play next turn. I'll be able to play with the revolutionary idea. And it was particularly important for me because I was aiming to get the space flight as my wonder, and obviously the revolutionary idea will get me even more culture with the space flight. I do draw that bonus card as well as an impact of balance, I think that is, and another aggression. Snowman plays Justice System, plays a revolutionary idea to take him on an infantry and a patriotism to upgrade them, to fix their strength situation, I guess make them now not the weakest, and they also take a reserves, which makes sense. Oh, I forgot to mention, so, I thought, I reminded myself and then forgot again. One other very important way to play my turn, we can see I took, 2 cards, and the multimedia was here, and I made sure to take 2 cards in front of it, so that it would be here, so that the multimedia would be discarded. Like, I can't take this multimedia, right, because I already had a copy, but what I can do to deny it from Sakich is make sure that it's discarded on DB Starman's turn, which means that DB Starman doesn't even have to cut it, it'll just naturally be cut. And that means that Sakich will get neither movies nor multimedia, which means that the potential strength of the Hollywood will be extremely limited. So I thought it was pretty important, very important to deny both of those to Sakich, and I ended up being able to do so. As we saw, Sakich was actually able to take the multimedia on their turn last turn, but chose not to. Oh yeah, David Summon also had to push strength because there was a war against them. So Sakich does indeed try an aggression against me, which, you know, on the one, so I was certainly fortunate to draw the bonus card rather than to defend it. We'll see at the end of the game if this 14 culture swing would have made a difference. But I think it's also, you know, like I said, I had drawn not a single bonus card had been played. I mean, maybe Sakich had drawn like a ton of bonus cards, so they thought that it was like there were only like 2 or 3 left in the deck, so they thought it was actually reasonably likely that I wouldn't have one. You know, I don't know what card Sakich drew, but you know, when it's still, you know. And in the average game, this would be unlikely to succeed, but admittedly, it is also lucky on my part, obviously, that I drew this right in time. Anyway, Sakich just bans the Knights, plays to be able to play a military build-up, to build second Air Forces, takes an urban growth. I'm not sure why the Knights was disbanded and not the Warrior, though. That confuses me. Maybe, again, you know, yeah, actually, I don't understand it. Anyway, they failed to take reserves and are still floating civil actions. Sadly, their hand is, you know, having so many techs in their hand that they're not playing with limited science production. Again, that alchemy they destroyed to get that war against me, we can see the cost of that throughout the rest of the game, the science that they lost. Age 4 begins. I build a 3rd arena for Pierre, and I take that space flight I mentioned previously. It's not going to be a huge wonder for me, but it's going to give me something like 20, I think, which is still, obviously, pretty good. And I destroy a lab to build a 4th arena. The extra 1 science would make no difference to me whatsoever if I'm building an urban building, you know, especially since I have the revolutionary idea. So I didn't value this philosophy at all. I preferred to get extra culture from the arena with Pierre. I also declared the Olympic Games this turn. Yeah, maybe, I guess there was, kind of doesn't matter when I declare the Olympic Games. Didn't take any of these cards from the row, I don't think any of them. I mean, the efficient upgrade, maybe if I decide to go with multimedias, but I thought that, there's no real reason to do that. I mean, this gets me more culture, building the bread and circuses instead. So I don't think any of the other cards in the row are worth not doing this. DB Strowman plays the movies, destroys a farm to build one, destroys a mine to get out of Uprising, takes an endowment of the arts, and upgrades another swordsman so they're not weakest again, and takes tanks. Loses 1 food to famine. Sakach Seeds reveals the wealthy territory. I think this is the one I seeded. Or did I seed the developed territory? I don't remember anymore. Anyway, this one, Sakach wins. I wasn't willing to bid too much into it because I didn't have the free population. I didn't want to leave myself... I guess maybe this is why I should have waited on the Olympic Games, because I wasn't at risk of an aggression anyway. So maybe I should have waited till an Olympic Games on my last turn, because then that would leave me potentially able to, for example, bid on a territory like this and like be vulnerable to an aggression to DB Strowman, but discourage that aggression by declaring the Olympic Games. So that was probably a mistake on my end, but because I didn't do it, I wasn't willing to put too much into the wealthy territory, and I have more than enough rocks to do what I want to do on my turn anyway. So anyway, Sakach is able to win it, puts a bunch of army into it, rebuilds one of the knights, takes Marie Curie, so who with the computers will now enable them to be the strongest if neither of the remaining opponents get stronger, and able to build the Hollywood. Unfortunately, with only 3 operas, they are only able to get 12 culture from the Hollywood. So yeah, denying those movies and multimedias and making a pretty big difference, I think. They were appreciated for the civil service, so I ended up not even playing this multimedia at all this game. I have other things I prefer to do with my rocks. Well, I think more that I didn't have, yeah, so I could have, instead of playing the civil service, I could have played the multimedia and upgraded once. Yeah, and played reserves for food and upgraded 1 multimedia. So that was definitely an option for me, but I preferred doing it this way because that makes me stronger than Sakach. So basically I was like, the multimedia would be a guaranteed +2 culture, right? But the doing it this way instead means that I can potentially win an impact of strength if someone played it. And I thought that right now, as we can see, I'm going to be pretty significantly ahead of Sakach in culture anyway. So I thought that the extra 2 guaranteed culture for multimedia wasn't that important. And instead, the potential, if there's an impact of strength in the deck, then doing this means that I'll get a 14 culture swing against Sakach. And that's obviously a lot better. So in this case, I was more guarding myself against ways I could lose. Actually, I think, if I recall correctly, on this turn, it was actually a little easy to predict impacts because only 1 impact has been played, which means that a maximum of 2 impacts can be in the deck. These impacts would be bad for me, so I didn't seed them. A maximum of 2 impacts can be in the deck if DB Strowman seeds the second one. And so I actually went through every single impact that could possibly be in the deck, like every combination of 2 impacts. And I'm pretty sure I made this play make it so that regardless, any combination of 2 impacts would still make me win this game. So again, you know, this is mainly because of impact of strength. So I think that's why I did it that way. In a situation like this, where there's so few impacts in the deck, I do think it's worthwhile to just go through every single option and, you know, see how you can how you can avoid, especially, like I said, a situation like this where I'm winning anyway. I want to make sure there's no possible combination of impacts in the deck that can let Sakach overtake me. Stevie Starman placing them under the arts as well as rocks to build a second theater. And they don't see, so the only impact of decks is an impact of wonders, which only gives Sakach +2 culture against me, and I end up winning this game by 18 points. So the aggression, the armed intervention, ended up just barely not actually mattering. Just barely, though. This was a very interesting game, I think. It was a pretty tricky game to play, especially in the early turns. and I took some big sort of moves like that Brennan Circus move, for example, taking Darwin early. It definitely was a little bit of an unusual game for me for a number of reasons. I think overall, I did point out some mistakes that I made, but I think like that Brennan Circus's play, while definitely questionable at the time, now that I look back on it, obviously the Brennan Circuses ended up doing a ton of work for me throughout the game. So in that sense, maybe it's hard to say, and I don't want to be results oriented, but you know, the Brennan Circus's play did like have this high roll option for me that I ended up landing. I don't know if this was high roll there. You know, I could have gotten Pierre even earlier and stuff, but on the other hand, like that, you know, that play I mentioned earlier where like I, you know, didn't build the printing press a turn sooner, that was a huge mistake. But aside from that, I don't think I noticed any really huge, really blatant mistakes I played. I was pretty proud of some things I did, like take that reserve so I could set up a second cool upgrade earlier, which ended up happening. And I think I also navigated age 3 pretty well. It was a tricky age 3 because I needed to keep up in strength with my opponents and also keep up in culture production with Sakich while finding a way for me to, you know, squeeze extra culture out of age 3 however I could. So, while some fortunate things happened for me as well, including getting that bonus card just in time to defend against intervention, overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how I played this game. And so after that game, as we can see, since I won and DB Starman came in last, but mostly because I won, this group has now been more or less decided. I am now guaranteed to win no matter the result of my final game with DB Starman. And Sakich, as we said previously, is still guaranteed to finish in last. There is a little bit of a question of second and third, where if DB Starman wins their final 2-player game, then they will be tied with El Chupacabra in points. So they'll sort of be tied in second and third, which makes a difference in terms of seeding. The which group you're in the next round of the World Championship is determined by the amount of points you earned in the previous round. So the more points you earn, then you'll play against opponents who earned fewer points in the previous round. So it is still of everyone's benefit, even if, you know, it's guaranteed whether they go to upper or lower bracket to get as many points as possible. So the last 2-player game against DB Starman will still be relevant. Until then, though, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment if you have any comments or constructive criticism on my play or my video making. I'm always looking to improve in both regards. And I hope to see you in the next video.